When you're young, Halloween feels like magic. Sleepovers, scary movies, and one last house with the lights still on. But the scariest moments come when the fun stops and silence takes over. These are true stories of kids who found out they weren't alone, scratching on windows, footsteps in the dark, and voices from the shadows. Once you hear them, you'll never look at the last house on the block the same way again. This story was sent to me by someone named Megan. She told me she still hates the sound of scratching on glass because of this night. When I was 11, Halloween meant two things: candy and sleepovers. That year, my neighbor Emma invited a group of us over for a Halloween party. Her parents went all out. Pizza boxes stacked high, bowls of popcorn, and a kitchen counter covered in soda cans. They even rented scary movies for us to watch on the old box TV in their living room. For 11-year-olds, that was paradise. There were 6 of us in total, all crammed into sleeping bags, sugar buzzing through our veins. Emma was dressed as a witch, her face still streaked green from the party earlier. I wore a cat costume my mom made with felt ears hot glued to a headband. 2 of the boys were superheroes. One girl was a ghost with a sheet that kept slipping, and my best friend had a clown mask she refused to take off. We thought we looked terrifying, but looking back, we probably looked ridiculous. Emma's house sat at the edge of the neighborhood, pressed right up against a thick line of woods. In the daylight, it just looked like trees, but at night the woods turned into a black wall. That living room window looked straight into them, and none of us liked glancing out when the lights were off. By the time Emma's parents said goodnight, it was almost midnight. We dragged our sleeping bags into a circle on the carpet, turned off the lights, and put on the first scary movie. The glow of the TV flickered across our faces while we stuffed ourselves with candy and dared each other not to scream. It was the perfect Halloween, until we heard the scratching. At first, I thought it was part of the movie, a faint, long scrape. But then it came again, software drawn out, right against the glass of the big window behind us. Everyone went quiet. Emma laughed nervously. Probably a branch, the wind or something. We nodded, trying to believe her. The TV kept playing, but none of us were watching anymore. We sat frozen, ears straining. The scratching came again, louder this time, like fingernails dragging across glass. "Who's doing that?" one of the boys whispered. Nobody answered. The sound stopped for a minute, just long enough for us to start breathing again. Then came the tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, rhythmic, not random. Emma's face went pale. She crawled toward the curtain, her hand trembling. "It's nothing," she whispered, more to herself than to us. She yanked the curtain back, and we all screamed. A pale hand pressed flat against the glass, fingers splayed wide, too high to belong to any of us. The skin looked gray in the TV light. Emma dropped the curtain and scrambled back into the circle. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. We just stared at each other, our breathing fast and shallow. Finally, one of the boys whispered, "It's a prank, right?" "One of your neighbors?" Emma shook her head. "No one lives back there, it's just woods." We tried to convince ourselves it was nothing, but the tapping started again. This time, faster, harder, tap, tap, tap. We screamed again and dove into our sleeping bags, pulling them up like blankets could protect us. The TV flickered, then cut out, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound was our ragged breathing, until we heard the back door creak open. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the sound of footsteps across the kitchen floor made my blood run cold. Slow, heavy steps, each one deliberate. Someone was inside. Emma clapped her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. My chest hurt from holding my breath. The footsteps grew louder, moving down the hallway that led straight to the living room. We scrambled, bumping into each other, tripping over candy wrappers and pillows. Someone hissed, "Hide!" We ran into Emma's bedroom, slamming the door and locking it. The six of us huddled in the corner, backs pressed to the wall, straining to hear. The footsteps reached the hallway. Boards creaked under the weight. Whoever it was moved slowly, like they wanted us to know they were coming. The doorknob rattled once, twice. We froze, not even breathing. Then silence. We waited, praying. After a long moment, the footsteps moved away, fading down the hall back toward the kitchen. But we didn't dare move. Every sound was torture. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, the faint brush of leaves against the house. We sat there all night, clutching each other, too scared to even whisper. When the sun finally rose, we crept out. The back door was locked. Emma's parents swore it had been that way all night. They told us it was just our imaginations, that kids work themselves up on Halloween. But we knew better. On the window, faint and smeared, were handprints. Large ones, too high up to belong to any of us. I still see those fingers when I close my eyes. And every Halloween since, if I hear scratching on a window, I feel 11 again. Stuck in that dark living room, waiting for the door to rattle. And I still wonder, whoever walked through that house that night, why didn't they come into the room? Why didn't they finish what they started? This story was sent to me by someone named Jordan. He told me he hasn't finished a block on Halloween night since the year this happened. I was 9 years old, and back then Halloween was the highlight of the year. Me, my cousin Nate, and my neighbor Sarah had been out since sunset, running from house to house with pillowcases instead of plastic pumpkins, because we thought it made us look serious. By the time the night was winding down, our arms ached from the weight, but our greed pushed us to keep going. The streets were emptying. Jack-o'-lanterns were burned low. Porch lights started blinking off one by one, and the air was colder than when we'd started. You could smell wet leaves and candle wax. Most kids were home by then, trading candy on their living room floors. But the three of us had one more goal: finish the block. That's when we saw it. At the very end of the street, one house still had its porch light on. We grinned at each other. "Last one," Nate said through his rubber werewolf mask. His breath fogged through the plastic snout. Sarah groaned, adjusting her crooked fairy wings. Better be worth it, my feet hurt. But we couldn't resist. The rule was simple: light on, you go. We trudged down the cracked sidewalk, candy bags thumping against our knees. The house itself didn't stand out much. 2 stories, chipped paint, decorations scattered across the yard. A scarecrow leaned against the porch railing, its floppy hat shadowing stitched eyes and a sewn-on smile. A single pumpkin flickered weakly by the steps, the candle nearly out. The door stood half open. We hesitated. Nate tried to shrug it off. Probably just forgot to shut it. Sarah frowned. Creepy. I tightened my grip on my pillowcase, the plastic wrappers crinkling inside. My chest felt heavy, but I followed anyway. The candy bowl sat just inside the doorway, piled high with chocolate bars, full size. Jackpot, Nate grinned. He pushed the door wider. The smell hit us first. Not candy, not pizza or popcorn like the other houses. Something sour, like damp laundry left too long in a basement. We crouched by the bowl, each grabbing a bar. That's when I noticed something that froze me in place. The wrappers weren't sealed right. The folds were messy, some taped shut, others with uneven tiers. "Guys," I whispered, "these don't look right." Nate shrugged. "Who cares? Freeze free." He shoved one into his bag. Sarah shook her head. Someone messed with these. Before we could argue, a sound broke the silence. Footsteps. Upstairs. Steady, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. We all looked up at the same time. The ceiling creaked above us. Nate swallowed. Guess someone's home. But his voice didn't sound sure. The footsteps stopped right above us. The air felt thick, pressing down. Then came a voice. Low, calm, flat. Close the door. We froze. The words carried down the stairs like they were meant just for us. Sarah dropped the candy bar she was holding. It hit the wood floor with a dull thud. Close it, the voice repeated. My chest clenched. Nate's hand twitched toward the doorknob, then pulled back. We all backed away together, hearts hammering. We stumbled onto the porch, shoving the door closed behind us. The scarecrow leaned slightly in the corner of my eye, its stitched smile aimed at us. Go, Sarah hissed. We bolted down the steps. Our candy bags thudded against our legs, wrappers spilling out behind us as we sprinted to the sidewalk. My lungs burned. Nate's mask twisted sideways as he gasped for air. Sarah's wings snapped when she tripped and nearly fell. We didn't stop until we reached Sarah's house halfway up the block. We pounded on the door, yelling for her mom. She opened it, startled at the sight of us red-faced and breathless. We babbled everything at once. Open door, candy, footsteps, the voice. Her mom frowned. That house? She shook her head. No one lives there, hasn't for years. We thought she was joking, but the next day we rode our bikes back. The porch light was off. The pumpkin was gone. The scarecrow was gone. The windows were boarded shut. Like the night before had never happened. Even now, almost 20 years later, I don't go to the last house on the block if its light's still on, because I'll always hear that voice again, calm and flat, echoing in my head. Close the door. Halloween ends when the lights go out, but the fear doesn't. The stories you heard tonight are real, and they remind us that the scariest things aren't in haunted houses. They're right outside your door. If you want more true horror like this, make sure you're subscribed, because the next knock you hear might not be a trick-or-treater. Halloween nights are supposed to feel safe. Glowing porch lights, laughter in the streets, the smell of pumpkin candles in the air. But sometimes, behind the masks and decorations, something darker waits. In these stories, kids looking for candy find themselves face to face with real terror. A house that shouldn't exist, and a man in a mask who follows too close. These are true Halloween nightmares about trick-or-treating gone wrong. This story was sent to me by someone named Tyler. He told me he hasn't gone trick-or-treating since the night this happened. When I was 10, Halloween was everything. The cold air, the smell of pumpkin candles, the sound of leaves crunching under sneakers. My friends and I would haul pillowcases instead of plastic pumpkins, because we thought that made us serious about candy. By the end of the night, your hands would ache from carrying the bag, but you'd never stop. That year, I went out with my two best friends, Jason and Danny. Jason wore a cheap skeleton mask, the kind with a rubber band that always snapped against your hair. Danny had a vampire cape that dragged on the ground, and I was a pirate with an eye patch that fogged up every time I breathed. We thought we looked awesome. The night was normal at first, running up porches, yelling, "Trick or treat," and shoving fun-size bars into our bags. Parents stood on driveways with steaming cups of coffee. Porch lights glowed warm. You could smell cider and smoke from fireplaces. It felt safe. It always did. But then we reached the last house on the street, the corner lot. That's when everything changed. The house looked wrong. No pumpkins, no fake cobwebs, no porch light, just shadows. Every other house was alive with kids and laughter. But this one sat quiet, like it didn't belong on the block at all. We almost walked past it when Jason suddenly stopped. "Look," he whispered. The front door was standing wide open, and just inside on the floor was a big plastic bowl overflowing with candy. Full-size bars, the holy grail of Halloween. Jason grinned through his mask. Jackpot. I stayed on the sidewalk. My stomach knotted. "Why would they leave it like that?" I asked. Danny hesitated too, his cape dragging on the ground as he shifted from foot to foot. "Yeah, that's weird." Jason rolled his eyes. "You guys are babies. Free candy's free candy." He jogged up the steps, Danny following more slowly. I gripped my pillowcase tighter, the plastic wrappers inside crinkling. Something about the house felt heavy. Wrong. Jason bent down and reached for the bowl. That's when the front door slammed shut. The sound was so loud it rattled the porch. All three of us jumped. Then the porch light above them buzzed to life, flickering before it held steady, bathing everything in sickly yellow. Jason dropped the candy bar he'd grabbed and Danny stumbled backward. The street was silent. Too silent. I remember realizing even the laughter from the other kids nearby seemed farther away. Then came the footsteps. From upstairs. Slow. Heavy. Each one dragged, like the person wanted us to hear them. Thump, thump, thump. Jason tried to laugh, but it cracked in his throat. It's nothing, just... A voice cut through him. From deep in the hallway, calm, low, too close. "You're not supposed to be here." Every hair on my body stood up. Danny's hand clamped onto my sleeve, his nails digging into my arm. "Run," he whispered. Jason dropped his entire candy bag and the three of us bolted. I nearly tripped on the steps, my pirate mask shifting sideways as I stumbled, but Danny yanked me forward. Behind us, I swear I heard fast movement, like someone rushing toward the door. We tore down the street, sneakers slapping against pavement, pillowcases bouncing against our legs. My chest burned, but I didn't stop. Jason screamed something I couldn't even understand. Danny wheezed, gasping, but he didn't slow down either. The only sound louder than our running was the pounding of my heartbeat. We didn't stop until we collapsed behind a hedge 3 blocks away. We crouched there, gasping, our breath coming out in white clouds. Jason's skeleton mask hung sideways, his face pale. Danny's hand shook so badly, he dropped 2 candy bars in the dirt. "What the hell was that?" Jason whispered, his voice breaking. Danny shook his head. "That wasn't a prank, that voice. He meant it." I couldn't stop shaking. My arms, my legs, even my teeth. I just kept hearing it in my head, steady and calm. "You're not supposed to be here." We argued about going back, but Danny and I wouldn't let Jason. We cut through yards and went straight home, avoiding the corner. Later that night, I told my parents. My dad frowned. "What house? That lot's been empty for years." I thought he was teasing me, but the next morning I biked past to prove it. My stomach turned cold. The lot was nothing but grass and a sagging fence. No porch, no door, no bowl of candy, no house. I don't know what we saw that night. I don't think I ever will. But even now, almost 20 years later, I won't walk down that street on Halloween. And sometimes when I see a door left cracked open, I hear it again in the back of my head. Low, calm, almost bored. Like someone is just waiting on the other side. "You're not supposed to be here." This story was sent to me by someone named Alex. He told me he still can't stand the sound of footsteps behind him on Halloween night. I was 12 when this happened, old enough to think I was too cool for trick-or-treating, but not old enough to say no to free candy. My little sister begged me to take her out, and I figured why not. If she got tired early, I'd get half her stash. It was one of those perfect Halloween nights. The air was crisp and smelled like wet leaves and pumpkin candles. Porch lights glowed orange. Kids in cheap costumes sprinted across lawns, and parents stood in driveways with travel mugs of coffee. My sister wore a princess dress that dragged on the ground, already snagged with dirt, and a plastic crown that kept slipping sideways. I had a pillowcase digging into my palm, heavy with candy, and I remember thinking life couldn't get much better. But that was before I saw him. Across the street, under a street lamp, stood a man in jeans and a gray hoodie. He wore one of those thin plastic masks you get from a bargain bin, with oversized eye holes and a slit for the mouth. His hands hung at his sides, no candy bag, no kids, just standing there facing us. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Halloween was full of people in masks, probably a dad waiting for his kid. But when we stopped so my sister could rummage through her bag for a lollipop, I noticed him stop too. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look around. He just stood there. Mask pointed right at us. "Come on," I told her, tugging her sleeve. We crossed to the next house. A few minutes later, I glanced back. He was walking again, the same slow pace, always keeping the same distance. By the time we hit the far end of Maple Street, I felt sweat on the back of my neck even though the night was cold. He crossed the street to our side. My sister tugged at my sleeve. "Can we go to the Wilsons? They have the big candy bars." "Not tonight," I said, forcing a laugh. My voice cracked. "We're heading home." She frowned. "But we're not done." "We're done," I snapped, sharper than I meant. We cut across a yard, my shoes crunching on leaves. I risked a glance back. He was closer now, still staring, still silent. "Hold my hand," I told her. We started walking faster, then jogging. My pillowcase bounced against my leg, the candy inside shifting and clattering. My sister's crown slipped off, but I yanked her along. Behind us, I could hear his footsteps too, crunching through the leaves. When we turned onto our street, I nearly cried with relief. Our porch light glowed at the end, and I could see my dad standing in the doorway, holding a bowl, chatting with kids. Home. We were safe. Then I heard it, the sound of running. I spun my head. The man was sprinting toward us. "Go!" I screamed. We tore down the sidewalk, candy spilling from my bag, my sister stumbling as her dress tangled around her shoes. I hauled her up by the arm, her scream cutting through the night. His footsteps pounded behind us. Closer, closer. Plastic mask catching the streetlight as he closed the gap. We flew up the driveway, nearly tripping over the curb. My dad turned, confused, as we scrambled onto the porch. "Inside," I shouted, shoving my sister through the door. I slammed it shut and twisted the lock. My chest heaved so hard I thought I'd throw up. Dad grabbed my shoulders. "What happened?" I couldn't answer. I just pointed at the window. But when he looked out, the street was empty. No running footsteps, no man. Just the quiet glow of porch lights and the sound of kids laughing down the block. The police came later. They searched the street, asked neighbors, even drove around. Nobody else saw him, nobody in a gray hoodie, nobody in a mask. It's been years, but I think about him every Halloween. How he kept just far enough back, waiting. How he only ran when we were almost safe. And now, whenever I'm out walking and I hear footsteps behind me, I feel my stomach drop. My hand tightens into a fist before I even turn, because I can't help but wonder if it's him again, just waiting for me to look back. Halloween brings masks, costumes, and late-night fun, but it also brings shadows you don't notice until it's too late. Tonight's stories reveal what happens when those shadows step closer. A night shift worker finds herself watched by someone who shouldn't be there, and a man leaving a party realizes the footsteps behind him aren't going away. These are true Halloween encounters where the night itself feels like it's hunting you. This story was sent to me by someone named Rachel. She says she quit her job the week after this happened and has never worked Halloween night again. I was 19, working the overnight shift at a 24-hour convenience store near my college campus. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was steady, and I figured Halloween would be easy. A few drunks coming in for chips or cigarettes, nothing I couldn't handle. The store was a small, bright box on the corner of a quiet intersection. Neon lights buzzing, coolers humming, the occasional car rolling past. From behind the counter, I could see the whole store, front door, and most of the parking lot through the big glass windows. It made me feel safe, in theory. At first, the night was normal. A few customers in costumes grabbed sodas and candy. Some college kids bought beer and joked about getting carded. By midnight, things had slowed down. I was refilling the coffee pots, scrolling on my phone between customers. That's when I noticed him. Across the street, leaning against the lamppost, was a man in a mask. Not a fun, goofy Halloween mask. A plain, white plastic mask. The kind with no expression, just hollow eye holes and a thin mouth slit. He wore a dark hoodie pulled tight around his head. At first, I thought he was waiting for someone. A rideshare, maybe. But 15 minutes passed, then 30, and he didn't move, just stood there. Every time I glanced out the window, I saw him, same spot, same posture, watching. My chest tightened. I told myself it was nothing. People wear weird things on Halloween. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking right at me. Around 1 a.m., I stepped into the back room to restock shelves. When I came back, my stomach dropped. He was gone. Relief washed over me for maybe 5 seconds, until I heard the door chime. I spun around. Nobody was there. The glass door slowly shut behind a breeze. I walked to the entrance, peering out. The street was empty. The lamppost across the road stood bare. My pulse raced as I locked the door, telling myself I was just being jumpy, but the feeling of being watched only grew heavier. At 1:30, the phone rang. I picked it up automatically. "Corner Market, this is Rachel." Nothing. Just breathing. "Hello?" The line clicked dead. My hands shook as I set the phone down. I told myself to focus on my work. Customers would come, the sun would rise, and the night would pass. I stocked shelves, wiped counters, checked expiration dates. But when I reached the back cooler, I froze. Footprints. Wet prints. Leading from the back door to the stockroom. Heavy shoe marks, darker against the linoleum. I hadn't heard the back door open. Nobody should have been there. "Hello?" My voice cracked. Silence. I followed the prints slowly, my heart hammering. They trailed toward the stockroom, then stopped halfway, as if whoever left them had vanished into thin air. I backed away, my whole body trembling. That's when the cooler door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, spinning around. Nothing there, just the faint echo of the metal closing. I bolted back to the front counter, locking myself behind it. My breathing came in ragged gasps as I gripped the phone, ready to call the police. At 2 a.m., the door chime rang again. I looked up. The man in the mask stood in the entrance. Up close, he was taller than I expected. The white mask glowed under the fluorescent lights. The hollow eyes fixed on me. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, the door slowly shutting behind him. My voice shook. "Store's closed." It wasn't, but I didn't care. He tilted his head, slowly, deliberately. My skin crawled. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. "There's a man in my store." When I looked back up, the door was swinging closed again. He was gone. The parking lot stretched empty under the neon lights. Police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched inside, outside, even checked the cameras. The footage showed me talking to empty space, the door opening and closing with no one there. They told me it was stress, or maybe some kid messing around with a costume. But I know what I saw, and sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in a brightly lit place, I still feel those hollow eyes staring at me. Waiting. The party that didn't end. This story was sent to me by someone named David. He told me he hasn't walked home alone on Halloween since this happened. I was 24, living in a small city where Halloween was more about crowded bars and house parties than trick-or-treating. That year, a friend invited me to a party just a few blocks from my apartment. Cheap beer, bad costumes, too loud music, the kind of thing you don't expect to remember. But I'll never forget how that night ended. The party itself was nothing special. I showed up in a half-hearted costume, a black hoodie, face paint smeared into something that looked vaguely like a skull. People crowded every room of the house, dancing in the living room, smoking on the porch, spilling drinks in the kitchen. The air reeked of beer, sweat, and cheap fog machine fluid. Every time the front door opened, the sound of laughter and music spilled out into the street. By 2 a.m, I'd had enough. Most of my friends had already left, and the house felt claustrophobic. My apartment was only 6 blocks away. It was cold, but I figured I'd walk, sober up a bit before crashing. I slipped out, pulling my hoodie tight around me. The street outside was quiet. Pumpkins on porches had burned down to stubs, and the occasional group of stragglers stumbled home in costumes. My breath fogged in the cold air as I started down the sidewalk. That's when I noticed him. Another guy stepped out of the party right after me. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't light a cigarette or call an Uber. Just started walking the same direction. He wore jeans, a dark jacket, and a cheap white plastic mask. The kind you buy at a drugstore, blank expression, oversized eye holes. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was Halloween after all. People wore masks. Maybe he lived nearby, but after a block, I realized he was still behind me. Same pace. Not close enough to be suspicious, but not far enough to ignore. I slowed down to check my phone. He slowed down too. I sped up, crunching over fallen leaves. So did he. The hair on my neck stood up. I turned down Elm Street. His footsteps followed. I cut across Maple. He did too. Every corner I turned, he mirrored. My pulse hammered in my ears. I told myself it was a coincidence, that I was paranoid, but when I glanced back, he was closer. Maybe 30 feet now. The mask glowed pale under the streetlight, blank eyes fixed on me. His hands stayed jammed in his jacket pockets. I swallowed hard and kept walking, trying to act casual. My apartment was 3 blocks away. Just 3 blocks. The street had gone silent. No cars, no laughter, no other people. Just the sound of my footsteps, and his, steady, deliberate. I turned again, hoping he'd keep going straight. But no, the footsteps echoed behind me, same rhythm, same pace. My stomach twisted. I dug my keys out of my pocket and clenched them in my fist. 1 block left. My legs felt heavy, my palms slick with sweat. I risked one more glance back. He was closer, 20 feet. I could hear his breathing now, shallow through the slit of the mask. That was it. I ran, my sneakers slapped against the pavement as I bolted down the sidewalk. Behind me, the sound of his footsteps quickened. He was running too. I tore around the corner onto my street, lungs burning, heart slamming against my ribs. My building loomed ahead, porch light glowing like a beacon. I fumbled with my keys, nearly dropping them as I stumbled up the steps. My fingers shook so hard I could barely fit the key in the lock. The footsteps stopped. I froze. Slowly, I turned. He stood at the bottom of the steps, perfectly still. The mask tilted up toward me, blank and pale in the porch light. His hands stayed buried in his pockets. Neither of us moved. Finally, I shoved the key into the lock and slammed the door behind me. My whole body shook as I twisted the deadbolt. I called the police, my voice cracking as I explained. They said they'd send a car to check the street. By the time they arrived, he was gone. No one else in the building had seen him. The cameras on the corner store down the street were broken. It's been 5 years since that night, and I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. But every Halloween when I head home, I can't stop myself from looking over my shoulder, because I keep remembering that blank mask under the streetlight, and the sound of footsteps quickening when I started to run. Halloween ends when the lights go out, but the fear doesn't. The stories you heard tonight are real, and they remind us that the scariest things aren't in haunted houses. They're right outside your door. If you want more true horror like this, make sure you're subscribed, because the next knock you hear might not be a trick-or-treater. Crowded bars, busy streets, a quiet house at the edge of town. All feel safe until the mask turns toward you, or the knock at the door doesn't stop. In these stories, a woman out for Halloween finds the same masked stranger in every photo, and a house sitter learns he isn't alone inside the walls of a supposedly empty home. These are true Halloween horrors that prove the scariest moments don't happen in haunted houses. They happen in real life, when the mask never leaves and the footsteps come from upstairs. This story was sent to me by someone named Jenna. She told me she still avoids crowded bars on Halloween night because of this. I was 26 the year it happened. My friends convinced me to go out for Halloween even though I wasn't really in the mood. They promised it would be fun. A bar crawl across downtown, everyone in costumes, cheap drinks, loud music, and too many bad decisions. I remember the night clearly. The streets were packed with people in every kind of outfit imaginable. Witches, superheroes, zombies, sexy nurses. The air smelled like beer, cigarettes, and fried food from the food trucks lined up on the corner. My friends were laughing, posing for pictures already tipsy. I wore a simple vampire costume, black dress, cape, fake blood smeared down my chin. It was supposed to be fun. It should have been just another messy Halloween. But there was one thing that ruined it. The man in the mask. I didn't notice him at first. Not until we looked back through photos later. But that night I felt his presence before I saw him. Inside the first bar, packed shoulder to shoulder, I had that odd sense someone was watching me. I brushed it off as nerves. When we took a group photo near the jukebox, I didn't see the figure behind us until the next day. A man in a plain, cheap plastic mask, the kind that's blank and white, with hollow eyes. He stood in the background, half in shadow, facing directly at me. But that night, we just kept going. We left the first bar, weaving through crowds of costumed strangers. Every block was buzzing, music spilling from doorways, people yelling, laughing, posing for selfies. At the second bar, I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I spotted him, standing by the bar, same mask, plain clothes, just watching. I froze mid-step. My friends didn't notice, already ordering drinks and shouting over the music. By the time I blinked, he was gone. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was coincidence, just another random guy in a mask. It was Halloween after all, everyone wore something. But as the night went on, I saw him again, in the background of another photo, leaning against the wall near the dance floor. Then again outside, standing across the street as we spilled out of the third bar. Every time the mask was turned toward me. By 1:30, the crowd had thinned. My friends were drunk, laughing too loud, tripping over sidewalks. I decided to call it a night. My apartment was only a 10-minute walk, and I didn't want to wait around for an Uber surge price. I slipped away without making a big deal of it, pulling my cape tight against the cold. The streets were quieter now. Pumpkins flickered on stoops. A few groups of people still wandered, but mostly it was empty. That's when I heard footsteps. I turned and my stomach dropped. He was there. The man in the mask, half a block behind me. At first, I walked faster. My heels clicked against the pavement, echoing too loud in the silence. His footsteps matched, steady, unhurried. I turned left. He turned left. I cut across the street. He did too. The air grew colder. My breath came fast and shallow. I fumbled with my phone, pretending to text, but my hands shook too hard. The screen blurred. I stuffed it back in my pocket and kept moving. 2 blocks from my apartment, I risked another glance back. He was closer. The mask glowed pale under a streetlight. Blank, expressionless, eyes locked on me. My legs trembled. I wanted to run, but the thought of hearing him sprinting behind me made my skin crawl. I reached my building, heart hammering. My fingers shook as I dug for my keys. That's when I heard it. The sound of footsteps quickening. I yanked the door open, slamming it shut behind me. I pressed my back against it, chest heaving, heart thundering. Through the glass window of the lobby, I saw him, standing just outside. The mask tilted slightly, like he was studying me. His hands stayed buried in his pockets. He didn't try the door, didn't move closer, just stood there. I backed toward the stairs, never breaking eye contact. By the time I reached the second floor, I dared a final glance out the window. He was gone. The police said there was nothing they could do. They told me it was probably just some drunk in a mask, messing with people. But when I looked back through the photos from that night, he was in more of them than I remembered. Always in the background, always watching. And I can't stop wondering, was he following me from the very beginning? Or did he just choose me, out of everyone in that crowd, to be his costume that night? This story was sent to me by someone named Chris. He told me he's never agreed to house sit again, especially on Halloween. I was a graduate student when this happened. Money was tight, so when one of my professors offered to pay me to house sit for the weekend, I jumped on it. The job sounded simple. Water the plants, bring in the mail, keep the porch light on for trick-or-treaters. The house was nice. 2 stories, big yard, quiet street on the edge of town. My apartment was small and noisy, so the idea of having a whole house to myself for a few days felt like a vacation. Halloween night started normally enough. I set out a big bowl of candy on the porch and left the light on. Kids came in steady waves, little witches, superheroes, parents trailing with coffee mugs. I smiled, dropped candy in bags, and went back inside to watch TV between knocks. By 10 p.m., the neighborhood had gone quiet. Most porch lights clicked off. Pumpkins flickered low. I brought the candy bowl inside, switched off the porch light, and locked the door. I had just settled in with a book when it happened. A knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I frowned. Trick-or-treating was over. The bowl was empty. The light was off. Still, I hesitated, then peeked through the curtain. A figure stood on the porch. They wore a cheap mask, pale plastic, blank expression with hollow eyes. A black hoodie covered the rest. I froze. My hand stayed on the curtain, my breath shallow. The figure tilted their head, slowly. Then a voice, calm, low. I saw the lights on. My stomach twisted. The porch light was off. I stepped back, heart pounding. The knocks came again, louder this time. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the homeowners or the police, but when I looked back out, the porch was empty. The street lay still, lined with dark houses. Leaves skittered across the pavement. Nothing else. I tried to convince myself it was just some late-night prank. College kids, maybe, but the unease stayed with me. I checked every lock twice, turned off the TV, and went upstairs to the guest room. I had just started to drift off when I heard it. Footsteps, soft, slow, inside the house. My eyes snapped open. I held my breath, straining to listen. The sound came from downstairs, then the creak of the staircase. 1 step, 2. I sat up, heart racing, clutching my phone. My throat felt tight, my skin prickling with sweat. The footsteps stopped halfway up. Silence stretched. Then the floorboard outside my door groaned. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A shadow passed under the door. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, whispering into the phone. Someone's inside. The dispatcher told me to stay quiet. Help was on the way. I crouched beside the bed, clutching the phone to my chest. Minutes crawled. Finally, I heard sirens outside. Flashing red and blue spilled across the window. The front door burst open. Heavy boots thundered through the house, voices calling out. When officers opened the bedroom door, I nearly collapsed with relief. But they found nothing. Every door was locked, every window sealed, no one else inside. The officer told me it was probably nerves. Halloween night, empty house, too much caffeine. But when I went downstairs later, I saw something they missed. The candy bowl I'd left on the kitchen counter sat by the front door, and inside it was a single piece of candy, unwrapped. Halloween is supposed to be about laughter, games, and candy, but even in the middle of the fun, there are moments when everything feels wrong. A school carnival crowded with families, yet one man never stops watching. A babysitter alone in a quiet house when a knock at the door turns into something terrifying. These are true Halloween stories that remind us the most dangerous monsters don't wear costumes. They hide in plain sight. This story was sent to me by someone named Brandon. He told me he still avoids school events on Halloween because of what happened that night. Do you remember being a kid at a school carnival? The smell of popcorn and cotton candy in the air, the crackle of cheap walkie-talkies the teachers carried, the clatter of games with plastic prizes that felt priceless at the time. It was safe, familiar, the kind of night parents loved because they could sit on the bleachers and let the kids run wild under the lights. I was 10 years old, and that year's Halloween carnival was the highlight of my fall. My friends and I sprinted between booths with sticky fingers and faces, half painted like skeletons. We tossed rings over soda bottles, won glow sticks that didn't glow very long, and ate funnel cake dusted with so much sugar it coated our costumes. At first, it was just fun. Loud, colorful, harmless. But have you ever had a moment where, even in the middle of a crowd, you suddenly feel singled out? Like one pair of eyes doesn't move when everyone else does? That's what it felt like when I noticed him. Near the ring toss booth, leaning against a fence, stood a man. Not a dad waiting with the stroller, not a teacher in charge of the raffle, just a man. Older than the parents around him, with a baseball cap pulled low. No costume, no smile, and his eyes, they didn't wander the way most adults' eyes do when kids are running around. They stayed locked on us. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I kept playing, laughing with my friends. But later, when we lined up for popcorn, I saw him again. This time on the other side of the lot, standing perfectly still. His hands were in his pockets, and though people brushed past him, he didn't move. Do you know that feeling when your stomach flips, even though nothing's really happened yet? That was me, clutching my dollar for popcorn, trying not to look at him again. I whispered to my best friend, "That guy's been watching us." He laughed nervously. He's probably just someone's dad. But when I pointed, the man shifted. Not toward me, not toward the games, just enough to slip back behind the crowd. The night went on. We distracted ourselves with games and prizes, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Every so often, I'd glance up, and there he'd be, near the dunk tank, beside the cakewalk, always on the edge of things. Never smiling, never talking, just watching. When the carnival wound down, the crowd thinned. Parents started corralling kids, herding them toward cars in the lot. The air grew colder, the smell of popcorn fading as booths closed. My dad waved us over, holding my little sister's hand. I felt relief that we were finally leaving. But as we walked to the car, I looked back one last time. The man was following. Not directly behind us, but close enough. A few paces back, moving when we moved. His face was still in shadow, but I could see the brim of his cap, the shape of his shoulders. My throat went dry. I tugged at my dad's sleeve. That man's following us. Dad glanced back, his expression hardening instantly. The man stopped. Just stood there in the middle of the lot, his hands in his pockets. The glow of a street lamp cut across his face, but the shadow from his cap kept his eyes hidden. Dad stared him down for a long second. The man tilted his head, then turned and walked away, vanishing into the darker part of the lot. We got into the car in silence. Dad locked the doors before starting the engine. My sister asked what was wrong, but neither of us answered. The whole ride home, my dad kept glancing in the rearview mirror. They never caught him. The school never mentioned it. For years, I wondered if he was some parent nobody recognized, or just someone who wandered in off the street. But here's what stays with me. That man didn't play games. He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't smile. He came to a school carnival surrounded by kids in costumes, and the only thing he did all night was watch. Eventually, years passed, and I realized I wasn't scanning the crowds anymore. For the first time, I felt relief. But then, one fall evening, I caught a man at the edge of a playground, standing still watching, and it all came flooding back. So now I check every time. I'll never stop again. This story was sent to me by someone named Lauren. She told me she quit babysitting the week after this happened and never went back. Do you remember what it felt like to babysit as a teenager? The mix of excitement and nerves? You had the whole house to yourself. You could eat their snacks, watch their cable channels, but deep down, there was always that fear. Every sound outside felt louder. Every shadow seemed darker when you weren't in your own home. I was 16 when this happened, asked to watch two kids on Halloween night while their parents went to a party across town. It sounded easy. Hand out some candy, keep the kids busy, get paid. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. The night started just like I expected. We watched a movie, the kids ate candy, and I passed out chocolate to trick-or-treaters who came by. By 9:30, the neighborhood had quieted. Porch lights clicked off one by one. The kids changed into pajamas, and I tucked them into bed upstairs. For a while, the house was still. I curled up on the couch with my phone, the TV humming softly in the background. Then I heard feet on the stairs. It was the older kid, 8 years old, pale and wide-eyed. "There's a man outside," he whispered. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "At the window." He waved at us. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced a smile. Probably just a neighbor heading home. I walked him back upstairs, trying to keep my voice calm. The kid's bedroom window looked out over the side yard. The curtains were half open. I peeked out. Nothing, just a dark yard littered with leaves, the faint glow of a streetlight at the corner. I told them to go back to bed, pulled the curtains shut, and went back downstairs. But have you ever brushed something off, only to feel that little knot of doubt grow bigger and bigger in your chest? That's how it felt. Around 10:30, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. A faint knocking sound. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. It came again, soft, almost playful. I turned toward the sliding glass door in the kitchen. The curtain was drawn, but the faint outline of a figure pressed against it, just for a second, then gone. My skin prickled. My breathing quickened. I told myself it had to be a tree branch, even though I knew there weren't any near that side of the house. I texted the parents. "Hey, did anyone stop by?" They didn't answer. The house was silent again. For 20 minutes, I convinced myself I imagined it. Then, 3 loud knocks, right behind me. I spun around. Through the sliding door glass, inches away, was a man in a mask. Plain white, expressionless. Hollow eyes locked on mine. His hand rested flat against the glass, as if testing it. My whole body seized. I stumbled back, my heart racing so fast it hurt. My throat closed up, the scream caught in my chest. The man tilted his head slowly, watching me. I bolted for the kids' room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands shook as I called 911, whispering into the phone so the kids wouldn't panic. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way, but those minutes stretched into forever. The kids whimpered in their beds as I sat pressed against the door, listening. A soft scrape against the siding. Then silence. When the police finally arrived, lights flashing through the windows, the man was gone. They searched the yard, checked the locks, walked the neighborhood. Nothing. The parents thanked me for keeping calm. The cops told me it was probably a prank. For a long time, I tried to believe that. Years passed, and eventually, I stopped thinking about it. I stopped checking the curtains. I even let myself babysit again. But one night, walking through my own kitchen, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, every nerve in my body lighting up. When I turned toward the window, there was no one there. But that was enough, because now I know, the moment you stop checking, that's when it happens again. And I'll never stop checking. Halloween ends when the lights go out, but the fear doesn't. The stories you heard tonight are real, and they remind us that the scariest things aren't in haunted houses. They're right outside your door. If you want more true horror like this, make sure you're subscribed, because the next knock you hear might not be a trick-or-treater. Every Halloween, we open our doors to strangers, trusting the costumes and candy to keep it all innocent. But sometimes, the knock at the door is more than just a game. Tonight's stories show what happens when a trick-or-treater refuses to leave, and when kids dare each other to approach a house that should have stayed empty. These are true Halloween encounters where curiosity and kindness turn into unforgettable fear. This story was sent to me by someone named Kevin. He told me he doesn't answer the door on Halloween anymore. He just leaves the candy outside. If you've ever handed out candy on Halloween, you know the rhythm of the night. At first, it's chaos. Groups of kids crowding your porch, costumes spilling across the sidewalk, parents calling out reminders. Then it slows. By 9 o'clock, you're down to a trickle. By 10, the streets are empty, porch lights flicked off one by one. It's quiet again, like the night resets itself. That year, I was in my late 20s, living alone in a small neighborhood. I liked passing out candy, seeing the costumes, laughing with the kids. It reminded me of being little, running house to house until my pillowcase nearly tore from the weight. Halloween night was normal. Dozens of kids came early, their voices echoing through the crisp fall air. I sat by the door with my bowl, smiling as they shouted, "Trick or treat," and scrambled away comparing what they'd scored. By 9:30, the flow had slowed. I checked my phone, stacked the empty wrappers, ready to turn off the porch light. That's when I heard the bell. I opened the door to find a single kid standing there. He wore a plain black hoodie and a cheap white mask, smooth and blank except for the eye holes. No parents in sight. No group nearby. Just him. "Trick or treat," he said quietly. I dropped a candy bar into his bag, forcing a smile. "Happy Halloween." He didn't answer, just turned and walked down the steps. I brushed it off. Maybe he was shy. But 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. I opened the door. Same kid, same mask. "Trick or treat," I laughed nervously. "Didn't I just see you?" He didn't answer, just held his bag open. I tossed in another candy bar. He walked away. By the third time, my chest felt tight. He stood there again, silent, the mask glowing faintly under the porch light. "All right, buddy," I said, trying to sound firm. "That's enough." He tilted his head slightly, then turned and walked away. I shut the door, locked it, and turned off the porch light. Enough was enough. But have you ever had the sense that even though the night should be over, something isn't? Like the rhythm never resets and you're just waiting for the knock? That's how it felt. Near midnight, the doorbell rang again. I froze. The house was dark, the candy was gone, no one should be there. Still, I crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. He stood there, same mask, same hoodie. But this time he wasn't holding a candy bag. His empty hands hung at his sides. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. The doorbell rang again, longer this time. Then 3 sharp knocks. I held my breath, clutching my phone, ready to dial 911. But after a moment, silence. I didn't look through the peephole again. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a prank. Some older kid messing with me. Years went by, and I stopped thinking about it. On Halloween nights, I even started passing out candy again, trying to enjoy it the way I used to. Then last year, around 10:30, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, a lone kid stood there in a black hoodie. He wasn't wearing a mask. But when I dropped candy into his bag, he didn't say a word. He just tilted his head, the exact same way I remembered. And that was enough. Because now I know, some knocks you never outgrow, and I'll never stop dreading the late-night trick-or-treater. This story was sent to me by someone named Megan. She told me that even now, when her kids go trick-or-treating, she never lets them walk up to a porch without her. Do you remember being a kid on Halloween and daring each other to do something stupid? There was always that one house you avoided. Maybe the lights were off, the yard overgrown, or rumors floated around about who used to live there. But if you were in a group, someone always suggested it. Bet you won't knock on that door. I was 10 years old the year this happened. Me, my brother, and 3 of our neighborhood friends were trick-or-treating without adults for the first time. That freedom felt huge. We cut across yards, ran ahead of the younger kids, and bragged about how much candy we'd collect by the end of the night. Every house on our street was glowing with jack-o'-lanterns, except one. It sat halfway down the block, shutters half broken, weeds pushing through the cracked sidewalk. No decorations, no porch light, no candy bowl. Just dark windows reflecting the streetlight. Of course, someone dared us. "Come on," my friend whispered, pointing. "Let's see who's brave enough to knock." We laughed nervously, shoving each other. but deep down, my stomach churned. You know that feeling when you don't want to look like a coward, even though every instinct is telling you to run? That was me, as my brother pushed me toward the gate. The air felt colder near that house. The grass was damp, and the wood of the porch creaked as I stepped onto it. My shoes left faint prints in the dust. I raised my hand to knock. That's when I noticed it. The door wasn't shut all the way. It hung slightly open, just enough to show a thin strip of darkness inside. I froze, my knuckles inches from the wood. Behind me, my friends giggled nervously. "Do it," one hissed. And then I saw movement. Just inside the gap, past the sliver of darkness, a figure shifted. A person standing completely still, watching. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stumbled back a step, whispering, "Someone's in there." The others laughed until they saw my face. Then they went silent. Down the street, an adult neighbor waved and shouted for us to hurry up. His voice was sharp, urgent. I looked back at the doorway. The figure hadn't moved, but I could feel it. Whoever they were waiting. The neighbor's voice came again, louder this time. "Get away from there." That was all it took. We bolted. Our bags of candy thumped against our legs as we sprinted toward the street, laughter dying into panicked gasps. When we looked back, the door was closed. We argued the whole way home about what we saw. Some said it was my imagination. Others swore they saw the outline too. The next day, in the daylight, we went back. The house looked empty. Dust covered the windows. No footprints on the porch but ours. For years, I convinced myself it was just shadows and fear, that maybe my imagination ran wild. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Then, one October night years later, I was driving through my old neighborhood. My kids were in the back seat, pointing at the decorated houses. As we passed that same street, my stomach dropped. The house was still there, still dark, still run down, and through the window, in the glow of a passing car's headlights, I swear, I saw the outline of someone standing perfectly still, watching. And just like that, the fear came flooding back. Because once you've seen someone waiting in the dark like that, you never let your kids go up to a porch alone again. Halloween ends when the lights go out, but the fear doesn't. The stories you heard tonight are real, and they remind us that the scariest things aren't in haunted houses. They're right outside your door. If you want more true horror like this, make sure you're subscribed, because the next knock you hear might not be a trick-or-treater.